The first rumors didn't start with generals. They started in muddy trenches, whispered quietly by tired German infantry who had survived another attack. If you hear they're Canadians, don't wait too long to retreat. In early battles of World War II, Canadian divisions were often underestimated. Many German officers expected inexperienced colonial troops, soldiers far from home, fighting someone else's war. They were wrong. When Canadian infantry arrived in Europe, they moved differently. Their attacks were slower at first, deliberate, almost cautious. But once they committed, they pressed forward with a relentless energy that surprised even Allied commanders. German reports began describing something unusual. Canadian troops adapted quickly under fire. Small units often kept fighting even when communication failed. They were known for holding ground no matter the cost. At places like Sicily and later in Normandy, German soldiers discovered that Canadian infantry didn't simply attack. They kept coming, even after heavy resistance. One captured German NCO later described it this way: "They didn't rush blindly. They came closer, closer, and suddenly they were inside your position." Canadian training emphasized teamwork and aggressive small unit tactics. Corporals and sergeants made decisions on the spot, meaning attacks rarely stopped when officers were lost, something German defenders found deeply unsettling. But reputation spreads faster than facts in war. By the time Canadian divisions reached Northwest Europe, stories were already moving through German lines. Canadians were tough in close combat. They advanced even in terrible weather, and once they targeted a position, they rarely gave it up. Some of those stories were exaggerated. But fear doesn't need accuracy, only repetition. And soon, the name itself started to carry weight. Not elite commandos, not massive armored divisions, infantry, men walking forward through mud, hedgerows, and gunfire until the defenders broke. As one German veteran later said, "When the Canadians were opposite us, we knew the night would be long."
Subscribe to the channel and don't miss new war documentaries.
By the summer of 1944, rumors were no longer just stories passed along the trenches. The Allied invasion had begun. Along the Norman coast and through the maze of hedgerows inland, German defenders suddenly found themselves facing a different kind of pressure, one that didn't come from massive armor or overwhelming air power alone. It came from infantry that refused to stop. Canadian units pushed through terrain that favored defenders. Every field seemed trapped. Every road ended in ambush. Machine gun nests were hidden behind thick hedges, and artillery zeroed in on every open space. German officers expected the attacks to stall. Instead, something unexpected happened. When one Canadian assault slowed, small groups began slipping through side gaps, moving quietly, adapting on the move. They fought in short, brutal engagements, sometimes only meters apart, where training and nerve mattered more than numbers. German after-action reports described the same pattern again and again. Positions thought secure were suddenly attacked from the flank. Defensive lines collapsed faster than expected. Canadian infantry kept reorganizing even under heavy fire. One German sergeant reportedly told his men, "If you hear shouting in English, check again. It may be the Canadians." The battles around Caen became especially brutal. Streets were reduced to rubble. Smoke blocked visibility. Units lost contact for hours at a time. But Canadian infantry kept advancing, slowly, methodically. They didn't charge recklessly. They pressed forward step by step. German soldiers began noticing something unsettling. These attacks didn't feel rushed or desperate. They felt inevitable. Even when casualties mounted, the pressure never disappeared. At night, patrols moved through ruined fields. At dawn, another push would begin. Defenders often felt they were being worn down, not by one overwhelming assault, but by constant grinding pressure. Some German units started requesting reinforcements when intelligence reported Canadian formations opposite them. Not because they were elite commandos, because they were consistent. And consistency in war can be more frightening than aggression. By late summer, the reputation had changed from rumor to warning. If they start moving, they don't stop easily. For many German infantrymen, that realization came too late, when the hedgerow ahead suddenly filled with shadowy figures moving closer through smoke and dust. And this was only the beginning.
Subscribe to the channel and don't miss new war documentaries.
By late 1944, the war in Western Europe had changed. The front no longer moved in dramatic breakthroughs. Instead, it crawled forward, village by village, field by field. And for German infantry, the pressure never seemed to end. Canadian formations were now experienced veterans. The men who had landed in Normandy were hardened by months of fighting, and their reputation had begun spreading faster than official reports. Sometimes it came from exhausted soldiers pulled from the line, sometimes from medics or logistics crews who heard the stories secondhand. The message was simple: if Canadians are opposite you, be ready. German defenders noticed something strange about the way these battles developed. The first contact was rarely dramatic. A few shots, a patrol disappearing into darkness, movement in the distance. Then the pressure increased. Canadian infantry worked in coordinated teams, small groups moving carefully, covering each other, testing positions before striking. When one approach failed, another appeared minutes later. It created a feeling many German veterans described as exhausting. There was never a moment to relax. Even at night, flares lit the sky as patrols clashed in fields filled with mud and shattered trees. Sleep became rare. Nerves wore thin. One German private later remembered, "You started to imagine them everywhere, even when nothing moved." The Canadian approach wasn't about dramatic charges. It was about persistence. Artillery would strike briefly. Infantry would probe forward. If resistance was strong, they pulled back, only to return again from another direction. Gradually, defenders felt surrounded even when they weren't. During several battles in Northwest Europe, German units reported that positions held for days suddenly collapsed in hours once Canadian infantry found weak points. Communication lines failed. Officers struggled to reorganize. And worst of all, the attacks kept coming. Some German soldiers said the most frightening part wasn't the fighting itself, it was the silence before it, the quiet moments when everyone knew movement was coming, but no one knew where. In ruined towns, shattered forests, and frozen fields, the reputation grew stronger. Not reckless, not loud, just relentless. By the time winter approached, many German infantrymen understood that this enemy wouldn't disappear after one failed attack. They would regroup, adapt, and return. And for men already exhausted by years of war, that realization weighed heavier than any artillery shell. Because fear in war doesn't always come from overwhelming strength. Sometimes it comes from knowing the enemy will simply keep walking forward, no matter how long it takes.